Welcome to Heidi Relationships. Today, we'll read some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. That would help the channel a lot. Thank you very much in advance.
The first one is titled, I Ada for kicking my wife and her daughter out of my house? Me, 32M, and my wife, Andy, 34F, have been together for about 3 years now. We are married for one of those years. We get along really well. Only problem is her daughter, Carrie, 16F. She is a daughter from my wife's previous marriage. Her father, my wife's ex-husband, died in a car accident about 5 years ago. When me and Andy started dating, we took things really slow. She didn't introduce me to Carrie until she knew things were serious between us. When I met Carrie, she was acting really distant and overall, she was mean to me. But I understood that, of course. I tried to bond with her and spend some time together, but I never forced her to do anything she didn't want to do. I told her to address me with my first name and had no intention to replace her father. I just wanted us to get along. Things got better, but sometimes she was rude to me and had some inappropriate comments. I never said anything to her, because my wife told me to just give her some time. Things really escalated after our marriage. I offered my wife and her daughter to live in my house. Andy immediately agreed, her daughter not so much, but since she was 15 at the time my wife gave her no choice. That's when the problem started. Carrie would intentionally make mess in the kitchen, like destroying glasses and plates, and leave the sharp glass on the ground. She would throw things out of the window and insult our neighbors, etc. This would happen like twice a week. I admit I have a bad temper, so sometimes I yelled at her and made her clean her mess, but I never laid my hands on her and never physically punished her. My wife repeatedly told her to stop behaving like that, but it didn't help. This went on for about a year. Last week she had outdone herself. Me and Andy were coming home from dinner and the garage door was open. We found Carrie there and she was destroying my car. I have BMW X5, so a pretty expensive one. She slashed 2 tires with a knife and scratched the surface with her keys. I completely snapped. I told her evil little b** and to get the f* out of my house. My wife sided with her and said that Carrie is just acting out and I shouldn't call her like that. I was furious and told my wife that if she's okay with Carrie destroying my stuff, she can get the f* out as well. We argued about 15 minutes. During the argument I said that I want Carrie to pay for my car and if she won't I will sue her. I have camera in my garage and have everything recorded. Andy told me I can't do that and that I'm heartless. In response to that I told them both to pack their bags and get out. It was almost 12 p.m. They packed and left. When I think about it now, I know I could handle the situation better and more calmly. But I think this kind of had to happen. We will be having a divorce and I will be seeing a lawyer to sue Carrie for destroying my car. I was just so fed up with her constantly destroying stuff and overall being toxic. I talked about this with my parents and my mom kind of thinks I'm So, Reddit Ada? A user in the comments said, NTA, there's a difference between giving space and allowing someone to walk all over you. You gave the space and drew a line. If your wife had any respect for you or your marriage, she would have handled it before it got to this point. The kid needs therapy, but things like that don't fly in the real world. Better a civil court case versus charges being pressed. Another user said, and here's why. Healthy people don't go from distant and mean to smashing plates and glasses multiple times a week over nothing. It doesn't sound like either of you ever actually did something about it other than yell at her and tell her to stop. You both just sat back and let it happen. Did either of you ever talk to her about this, get her therapy, do anything? This girl is clearly crying out for attention. Yes, she communicated that very poorly, but it doesn't seem like her mom taught her communication skills. The next one is titled, Update. I Ada for kicking my wife and her daughter out of my house? Hey guys, a lot of you asked me how I am doing and for an update. It has been couple of weeks since the incident now. I met with my wife and we discussed everything. She wanted to continue with our marriage and give it a second chance, but I told her I want a divorce. It was very hard for me, but in the end, I think it was a right thing to do. I still love my wife, but I don't want to be caught in the middle of all that again. Last year was the most stressful and hardest period of my life, and I felt like I have to put my mental health and my well-being first. This wasn't easy for Andy either, but I think she understood. We agreed this would be also better for Carrie. I strongly advised to get her daughter professional help, and Carrie has started therapy last week. We went to lawyer's office and signed the divorce papers. It was really quick and smooth. We had a prenup, didn't share money, and our marriage lasted only a year. There are still some small things that need to be dealt with, but it is pretty much over. I also met with my lawyer. We got a rough estimate on that car damage, and it's a lot. 2 slashed tires, deep scratches all over the car, and a bit cracked window. It is about 6,000 euros. Average salary in my country is about 1,000 euros a month, so this is a lot of money. We talked to my insurance company, and my insurance doesn't cover vandalism or any kind of this damage. My lawyer strongly advised me to go to the police and press charges against Carrie. I wasn't sure about this, but he said if anything goes wrong, this will help my case. So, I did that. Couple days after I met with Andy to talk about this situation. We both brought our lawyers to help us with all the legal stuff. I told her my insurance won't cover anything and I want her to pay for all the damage. She said she doesn't have that much money. They moved in with her parents and she is looking for a new place, so she needs all the money she can get right now. I offered to pay for the damage now, and she will be paying me back when she has the money. She agreed. Because I reported Carrie to the police, she will have a criminal record, which sucks, because it will likely cause her problems in the future, but she kind of brought it on herself, and in a couple of weeks she will be facing something like a civil rights court. My lawyer said she will most likely end up getting a court-ordered psychiatrist and some hours of community work. The next one is titled, Cheat on Me with My Best Friend? I'll wreck your career and publicly humiliate both of you. Craphead and Sarah have been like family to my wife and I for several years, practically ever since we moved in across the street from them. The 4 of us were extremely tight. Our kids are the same age as theirs and are all good friends. We were one big family unit. We did dinner together a few times a week. We went on vacations together. I truly saw Craphead as a brother, and my wife and Sarah were very close too. 5 months ago, I was completely blindsided by the discovery of an affair between my wife and Craphead. My wife had left her email open on our computer, and I saw an email from her to her longtime therapist saying that Craphead would be joining her at an upcoming session, again. WTF? My mind started racing. Why in the world would Craphead be going to her therapy sessions without my knowledge? I did a search and found some other emails to and from the therapist proving that Craphead had been going to sessions together with her for about 6 weeks. I checked our mobile phone account and discovered that, since late summer, they had been exchanging hundreds of texts every day, peaking at nearly 500 per day by the holidays. Speaking of the holidays, my wife and I hosted both of our families, parents, siblings, etc., for both Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, and Craphead and Sarah joined us either for dinner or after dinner on both holidays. Text records showed that the entire time that they were at our house celebrating with our families, my wife and Craphead were texting each other across the room. They were doing that pretty much every time the 4 of us hung out, for months. And, all day every day just in general. But what bothers me the most is that they were doing it with Sarah and I right there. I confronted my wife with the evidence, and she admitted that yes, she and Craphead had fallen in love. It just happened. I don't know how, but I love him, and I just don't feel anything for you anymore, I'm sorry. They had gone on a school district trip together. Something had happened in her hotel room, and things had moved quickly from there. She explained, as I lay face down on the couch, unable to look at her, that they had already made plans to move out and divorce me and Sarah, and while they didn't plan to move in together immediately because of the kids, they'd probably do so eventually. The meetings with the therapist were supposedly mostly for the purpose of finding a way to break this to me and Sarah as gently as possible, because they were so very concerned for our well-being. Sarah and I are fairly certain that they weren't planning on telling us about the affair at all and were simply going to discover their feelings for one another several months down the line, after they'd come up with some other reason to divorce the two of us. My wife moved out 2 months ago. I was, and still am, utterly destroyed. I cry every day. I cried writing the first few paragraphs of this story just now. I worry nonstop about the impact on our kids. But I am also not exactly a shrinking violet when I feel that I've been wronged. And in this case, I was, objectively, very, very wronged. So, a couple of years ago, Craphead ran for a Board of Education seat as a pretty extreme underdog. I helped him with his campaign materials and debate prep, and my wife, a well-known school district employee, this becomes important later, got the word out as best she could. Much to our surprise, he actually won in a squeaker, by just a few dozen votes. Being on the board became the center of Craphead's world. He joined every committee that he could. This turned into the foundation of his affair with my wife, as they were constantly going to school events and meetings together on evenings and weekends. Once I discovered the affair, my thoughts turned pretty quickly to revenge, and it occurred to me that an extramarital affair between a member of the Board of Education and an employee of the school district was at least bad politics and possibly violated district policy. Making things far worse for them was that my wife was in the running for an open administrative position, and everyone knew that she was more or less guaranteed the job and the major pay raise that came with it. She had just finished her master's degree in school administration, at the urging of her principal and the superintendent, so that she could be promoted to this specific position. I had plenty of evidence of the affair, texts from both of them admitting to it, text records showing that they were texting hundreds of times a day, emails to and from the therapist, etc. I considered simply emailing all of the evidence to the board and the superintendent, but felt like I, as the grieving, betrayed spouse, might not be seen as a credible source. So instead, I invented a fictitious, furious friend, who was planning on showing up to the next board meeting and publicly shaming the two of them for their affair. I told my wife that I'd tried to talk this person down but couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't show up and humiliate them publicly. As I expected, this led Craphead to conclude that the only option was for him to preemptively admit the affair to the board. The superintendent subsequently recommended that Craphead resign, which he did. Sarah said that he was utterly humiliated and crushed, and barely got out of bed for a few days afterward. Once word of the affair and Craphead's resignation started getting around, the superintendent, a longtime friend of both my wife and Craphead, contacted my wife and tearfully informed her that it was no longer politically appropriate for her to be promoted to an administrative position within the district. The position that had been lined up for her was later filled by an outside candidate. This sent waves of confusion and rumor throughout the district, as it was pretty well known that my wife was getting the job. The day after she was informed that she wasn't getting the promotion, my wife and I, despite our crumbling marriage, took our son out to breakfast together on his birthday, and a parent stopped by our table to congratulate her on her new role. She said thanks, then excused herself to go cry in the bathroom for a while. I let the dust settle for a couple of weeks, and then, right before my wife moved out, let them in on my little secret. There was never a furious friend, threatening to expose them in the first place. Just me. Word of all of this has gotten around our fairly small town, which Craphead grew up in and my wife has worked in for nearly 20 years. My wife refuses to talk to me about how things are at work now, but I've heard from some people I know in the district that her formerly spotless reputation has taken a major hit. Craphead, formerly a gregarious social presence in our neighborhood and at events and pubs in town, has completely gone underground and barely emerges to mow his lawn. He's moving out soon, to a crappy little townhouse which is all he can afford due to all the children's support he's going to have to pay his wife. My wife and Craphead claim that they plan on trying to make things work together, despite all the public humiliation. I wish them lots of luck with that. I'm sure it will be a lot of fun to show their faces together in town. Answers to some common questions in the comments. Are you and Sarah a thing now? You should totally be a thing, that would be awesome. No, we're friends. We've been incredibly important to each other since this all started and have certainly gotten a lot closer, but not in the way everyone's thinking. This would all be so much harder to deal with if I didn't have her to lean on, and she says she feels the same way about me. We're going through basically the exact same situation with the same players, after all. Craphead hasn't moved out yet. Once he does, we plan to go back to getting the kids together more often like they used to. It'll never be the same, of course. She already does come over with the kids from time to time, but it's just tough with Craphead's constant presence across the street. Didn't your revenge hurt both sets of kids? Not really. Craphead has a day job. The Board of Education was his hobby and his passion, but this didn't affect his income at all. And my wife has been assured that if she wants to pursue an administrative position with another district, she'll have glowing letters of recommendation from her superintendent and principal. It'll mean giving up a lot of work relationships in the process, but given the hit her reputation has taken, I'm guessing she makes that jump sooner rather than later. In the meantime, not moving to an administrative job means that she still has summers off with the kids. Why do you call her your wife instead of your former wife? We're working out way through divorce mediation, but it isn't final yet. Will be soon. Why didn't you notice all of the texting your wife was doing? Well, I did. It was really starting to piss me off. It was excessive. She has a big social circle and does tend to text a lot anyway, but it was really getting over the top, to the point where she was completely ignoring me and the kids. At one point in November, I asked her to agree to a "no phones at the dinner table" rule, which she agreed to reluctantly but then would put through dinner, and eventually she just started using her phone during dinner again. All that said, I was blind. Not only was the texting getting weird, but her relationship with Craphead was starting to make me uncomfortable. Sarah noticed it too and agreed. We confronted them a couple of times about it directly and they both swore up and down that it was just school stuff that they were talking about, there was nothing else going on. And for whatever reason, we believed them. Probably because the mind tends to refuse to see things that it doesn't want to see. This is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the relationship stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video and write a comment. I really appreciate your support and it helps my channel so much. Thank you.